I'm going to review some basic factoring that you should have previously learned in Algebra 2 and even Algebra 1. So let's take a look at number 1. 21x squared minus 7x. So this method of factoring is going to be GCF. We always want to check for GCF first. They can both be divided by 7 and they can both be divided by x. So 7x is on the outside. 21 divided by 7 is 3. X squared divided by x is x. Remember that this technically has an imaginary 1 as your exponent, and when you are dividing, you subtract. And then minus 7x divided by 7x is 1. Anything divided by itself is always 1. The way to check factoring is if I were to distribute back out, I would end up with the same or the original question. Number 2, x squared minus 36. Both of these are perfect squares, so this is dots, difference of two perfect squares. So you have two parentheses because you're going to have two binomials. One gets a plus, one gets a minus. The square root of x squared is x. The square root of 36 is 6. So we have x minus 6 and x plus 6. Doesn't matter the order of them, but inside the parentheses, the order does matter. The binomial has to be in the order of the original question. So x came first in the question, x comes first in the answer. Number 3, x squared plus x minus 6. We have three terms. This is a trinomial. There's no GCF, so we are going to use AM. Square root the first piece, x squared, so each parentheses gets an x. If you're using the sign trick, bring down the first sign and multiply the two signs together. A positive times a negative is a negative. I'm looking for something that multiplies to 6. So my options are 1 and 6 or 2 and 3, but I want it to add or combine with the signs that we have to a 1, a positive one. Bigger number comes first, so we have x plus 3, x minus 2. Number 4 is a little bit different. You may notice that there is a binomial that they have in common. So that's essentially my GCF, and what you're doing is dividing by that GCF of c plus 2. So that comes to the outside, and then what's left over goes together inside your second parentheses. Number 5, this is a binomial once again. This is dots again. It's important to know that when we are working with numbers, it's easy to recognize perfect squares. 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, and so on. You can make that whole list for yourself. But when we are talking about exponents, any even exponent is a perfect square. So when I square root these, I'm going to have 3x to the 4th minus y to the 5th and 3x to the 4th plus y to the 5th. Remember, one gets a plus, one gets a minus. Number 6, 2n squared plus 26n plus 84. This can actually all be divided by 2, so I have a GCF of 2 on the outside. And now we always want to factor completely. So inside my parentheses is now an AM situation. You always want to bring down your GCF because it has to be part of your answer. If I have an N and an N, I bring down my first sign of a positive. Positive times a positive is another positive. I want to multiply to 42. So you can list these all out if you want. Hopefully you recognize that it's 6 and 7. 6 times 7 is 42. 6 plus 7 is 13. So bigger number comes first. In this case, it doesn't matter because they're actually both positives, plus 7 and plus 6. But you just want to stay consistent, especially if you're using that sign trick. So my final answer is 2, n plus 7, n plus 6. So let's just recap a few things. You always want to make sure that you check for GCF first. You always want to factor completely. So this is until it's prime. When it says factor completely, that means you're factoring more than one. They're not always going to say factor completely. Sometimes they'll say it and you'll only factor once. But factor completely means you just keep going and going and going until you can't factor anymore. So we are always checking for GCF first, but 2 terms, we should be thinking DA. 3 terms, we should be thinking AM or AC, which we didn't review in this video, but we will review. And then 4 or more terms, we're thinking grouping. We didn't review in that video either, but we will review that going forward as well. This was just a quick recap of some basic methods of factoring because we're going to go into more and get a lot more in detail and a lot more challenging problems going forward. So this was just the basics for you.